You noticed it again last week. Someone offered to help, and your mouth said no before your mind had even measured the offer. Not a considered refusal. A reflex. The word escaped before the weighing began, and afterward you were left with a strange residue you could not name. Something between pride and hunger. You called that independence. You have called it that for years. It has been the one thing about yourself you never questioned. The trait people mentioned first when they described you. But independence is a choice. And what came out of your mouth was not a choice. It was a mechanism, something answered on your behalf without consulting you. You have carried heavier things than most people around you know. You moved apartments alone. You sat in waiting rooms alone. You made the difficult phone call at the difficult hour and told no one it was difficult. And the strange part is not that you did these things. The strange part is that you never seriously considered another way. There was never a moment when you thought, I could ask someone. The thought did not appear and get rejected. The thought simply did not appear. That is the first thing worth noticing. Not that you refuse help, but that the option was removed from the menu so early that you never learned it had ever been there. Somewhere near the beginning, someone was relieved by you. That relief was the first payment. You did not understand it as payment at the time. You understood it as love. You were the one they did not have to worry about. That sentence has followed you your entire life. Sometimes spoken aloud, sometimes worn like a coat you were given and never thought to remove. They did not have to worry about you. Everyone else needed something. You needed nothing, and needing nothing became your contribution. Consider what that arrangement quietly taught you. It taught you that needing something was a cost imposed on someone else. It taught you that your value existed in the distance between what you took and what you gave, and that the distance was greatest when you took nothing at all. So you stopped taking. And they praised the stopping. Here is where the false interpretation lives. You believe you were praised for being strong. Look more carefully. You were praised for being convenient. Those are not the same thing, and the distance between them is where the wound sits. Strength is a quality that belongs to you. Convenience is a quality that belongs to the people around you. One is a property of your character. The other is a property of your usefulness to a system that had limited attention, limited patience, and limited care to distribute. From inside, the praise felt identical. That is what made it work. Praise is a strange instrument. It does not feel like a demand. It arrives dressed as admiration, recognition, even love. You never developed defenses against it because nothing in it announced itself as an instruction. But it was an instruction. Every time someone said, you never complain, you never ask for anything, you are so self-sufficient, a small mechanism tightened. The compliment named a shape, and the shape became more permanent because it had been named through a Jungian lens. This is how a persona forms, not necessarily through deception, but through reward. The self does not consciously decide to become a mask. It simply notices which of its faces receives light and turns that face outward more often, until repetition becomes stillness, until the face no longer feels like a choice. Your persona was not built from lies. It was built from a true fragment of you that was fed while the rest of you went hungry. Because you probably were capable, that is what makes this difficult to see. There was likely a real capacity in you, an early competence, a genuine ability to manage yourself. The persona did not invent that ability. It found it, rewarded it, and eventually made it compulsory. That is the distinction that matters. The problem was never that you were self-sufficient. The problem was that self-sufficiency stopped being something you were allowed to set down. Now the mechanism is old, and you are living inside its consequences. You are the person others call when something has gone wrong. You are almost never the person who calls. Notice how that asymmetry does not feel like a wound. It feels like a role. It feels natural, comfortable even. There is a particular satisfaction that arrives when someone tells you their difficulty and you hold it steady for them. That satisfaction is real. It is also a form of psychological income. Being needed reassures you that your place is secure. Your jaw tightens when someone asks if you are all right. Not much, just enough that you notice it afterward. The question itself is what tightens it, because the question introduces a possibility, and the possibility is that you might not be all right. If you are not all right, something might be required of them, and if something is required of them, the arrangement that has kept you connected to them begins to tremble. So you say you are fine, not because you want to deceive them, but because you want to protect the structure that lets you keep them. That is the sentence worth sitting inside. You do not refuse help because you dislike help. You refuse help because asking would risk the very thing that once made you easy to keep. You already understand this from the opposite direction. When someone in your life needs too much, too often, something inside you goes quiet and cool. You do not stop caring, but a distance opens, an evaluation begins. You become conscious of the weight. You have watched people be loved less because they needed more. You saw it early, and you have seen it since. Without ever forming the conclusion in words, you decided that need was the thing that cost people their place, so you removed your need. It was not heroism, it was accounting. Your chest goes still before a certain kind of conversation. You know the kind, the one in which you might have to say the words, "I need something from you." The stillness arrives before the words do, as though the body has already calculated the risk and closed the account. But there is something beneath the fear of losing belonging. And it is not only fear, it is closer to a bargain, and every bargain has a second side, because there is something you receive from needing nothing that you would lose the moment you asked, something you have not admitted, because admitting it would make the whole arrangement feel less noble. You do not have to find out whether they would come. That is the payment. That is what the arrangement has been buying all along. As long as you never ask, the answer remains unknown, and unknown is infinitely safer than no. Every person you have never asked remains, in a sense, someone who might have said yes. They exist in a permanent state of untested willingness. You have never had to watch a face hesitate. You have never had to hear the pause before the excuse. You have never had to know. Your independence was not only protecting your belonging, it was protecting your illusion of it. Think about what that means for the closeness you already have. The people who love you love someone who has never tested them. They have never had to choose. Their loyalty has never been asked to reveal itself. So it remains in your mind perfect, undisturbed, and completely unverified. You have kept everyone at the exact distance where you can still imagine they would come. Because believing someone would be there and asking them to be there are not the same thing. You have only ever permitted the first. The unlived life here is not some grand, postponed ambition. It is smaller and stranger. It is the version of you who would have found out. Somewhere there is a self who would have spoken the words, watched what happened, and lived inside the actual answer. Whatever it was, that self was postponed, and what it was postponed for was not safety exactly. It was the preservation of a hope that could never be damaged because it was never used. Your shoulders rise slightly when someone moves toward you with concern. You have never once decided to do that. The mechanism knows what it is guarding. The mechanism has always known. It has been, and it does not ask permission before it repeats. What you called needing nothing was never an absence. It was a construction. It was expensive, and someone has been paying for it in a currency you have never examined closely. That someone has always been you. You built a life that would never require you to ask, and you did not build it deliberately. That is what makes it so difficult to see. There was no decision, no plan, no evening when you sat down and designed an entire structure around a single refusal. There was only a long series of small choices, each one reasonable, each one made by a person who believed they were simply being practical. Look at the work you chose, or look at the way you learned to do the work. If the choosing was never entirely yours, you became competent at things that did not require a second person. You developed skills in isolation because isolation was where competence could grow without exposure. And you are good. That is not in question. But notice where that ability was directed. You became excellent at the tasks that could be completed alone and merely comfortable with the ones that required someone else to hand you something. Every domain where collaboration is unavoidable carries a low static for you. You manage it. You remain pleasant inside it. But the moment a project depends on someone else delivering, a quiet vigilance switches on, almost without noticing. You begin constructing the version you could complete alone if you had to. You call this responsibility. You call it being prepared. You call it having a backup plan. It is a backup plan that has rarely been allowed to remain unused. The arrangement made things possible. That is the part no one says clearly enough. And it is the reason the pattern survived for so long. It was not simply a mistake. It worked. It made you reliable in a world that rewards reliability. It made you promotable. It made you the person who gets handed the difficult assignment, because everyone knows you will not return with too many questions. Much of your competence was developed inside the refusal, which means the refusal is not separate from your success. It is load-bearing. Consider what would happen if you removed it, not emotionally, structurally. The life you have built might not remain standing in its current form. That is why the pattern does not respond to insight alone. You can understand it completely and still be unable to move, because understanding does not address the fact that the thing you would be dismantling is also the thing holding up the floor. Look at your friendships. Look at the specific shape they tend to take. You are the confidant. You are the person others tell things to. There is a particular kind of conversation you have had 1,000 times. Someone opens something painful. You receive it carefully, and they leave feeling lighter. You go home, and the exchange is complete. Nothing is owed. Nothing has to be returned. Nothing more needs to happen. And you may never have experienced that as an imbalance. That is worth stopping on, because imbalance is usually felt by someone who expected mutuality to take a different form. You did not. The arrangement in which you received everything they revealed, while revealing almost nothing of yourself, was not merely a deficit you tolerated. It was part of the design. Your care was real. Your generosity was real. But beneath both was another function you may not have recognized. You were securing a position in which you were necessary without ever becoming dependent. Notice the elegance of it. If you are the one who listens, you are needed. If you are needed, you are more likely to be kept. And if you never speak from the place that needs an answer, nothing you reveal can ever be met with less than you hoped for. The role paid in 3 currencies at once belonging, safety, and the permanent deferral of disappointment. No wonder it survived. Something similar happened in the closest relationships you have known. The person who came nearest to you eventually noticed something they could not quite name. When they tried, they used a word like wall, or distance, or said that you never fully let them in. You disagreed. You had told them things. You had been present. You had been, by any reasonable measure, open, but they were not describing the amount of information you shared. They were describing its direction. Everything you offered flowed outward. Almost nothing was permitted to flow back toward you. They could not point to what was missing because nothing obvious was missing. A hole can be seen. A door that was never installed cannot. Eventually, they stopped searching for it. The moment they stopped, something in you relaxed. Something else, quieter and further down, registered a loss for which you had no name. What Jung understood about the persona is that it is not merely a lie the individual tells. It is an arrangement between the individual and the world participates in maintaining it. Everyone around you accepted the terms. They accepted that you were the one who was fine. Once an entire social field has signed the same contract, changing it is no longer a private act. It becomes a renegotiation with everyone at once. And this is where the pattern becomes more than a habit. A habit can be interrupted by attention. A complex is an older structure that organizes the reaction before conscious thought arrives. Yours has organized your life so smoothly that it has rarely needed to announce itself. It does not appear as fear. It appears as competence. Your throat closes slightly around certain sentences, not the complicated ones, the simple ones. Can you help me? I am struggling. I do not know what to do. Those sentences carry a physical weight for you that they do not seem to carry for other people. You can express complicated ideas with ease. You cannot say the small sentences that admit a lack. That is not merely a communication problem. That is a structure guarding a door. And beneath that door is the thing you organized your life to avoid discovering. It is not rejection exactly. Rejection would at least be clean. What you are avoiding is something more specific and, to you, more humiliating. You are avoiding the moment when you ask, they say yes, and you hear in the yes that helping you has cost them something, because that is the response that seems capable of confirming everything. Not the no, the reluctant yes, the help that arrives carrying a faint sound of effort behind it, the sigh, the pause, the almost invisible shift in the face, the evidence that your need has added weight to someone else's life, and some part of you would interpret that weight as proof that you had been right all along, that needing anything makes you difficult to love. You have built a life in which you almost never have to hear that sound. Your independence was never only about strength. It became a long project designed to keep one particular piece of evidence from ever reaching you, and the project succeeded. No one has hesitated in front of you because you rarely gave them the opportunity to hesitate. But something else happened while the project was running. The feared evidence never arrived. Yet the fear was never disproven, and a fear that is never disproven does not disappear. It compounds. Every year you did not ask. Asking became heavier. Every untested relationship made the next test more frightening. Protection was not neutral. It was interest accumulating on a debt you refused to examine. So now you are here, inside a life that functions. You are surrounded by people who admire you. You possess a competence you earned honestly. Nothing obvious has collapsed. And yet something has begun to go wrong that has no visible external cause and no clear name. The structure is still standing, but you are beginning to notice that you cannot get out of it. That is the shift. For most of your life, needing nothing was something you did. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being an action and became a condition. You may tell yourself that you could ask if the situation were serious enough, but when the moment comes, the apparatus that would perform the asking cannot seem to find the words. It was never fully built. And now, decades later, you are fluent in every language except the one that says, I cannot carry this alone. The bargain has held perfectly. The bargain is now the cage. You noticed the tiredness before you noticed anything else, and you have been explaining it away for years. Not enough sleep, too much work, the age you are. Every explanation sounded reasonable, and none of them reached the real cause, because the tiredness does not respond to rest. Sleep does not touch it. You have tried. You have taken the weekend, the week, the actual holiday, and returned with the same weight resting in the same place, unmoved by any amount of lying down. That is because this is not the tiredness of exertion. It is the tiredness of a mechanism that has been running for decades without ever being switched off. It cannot be switched off easily because no switch was installed. The mechanism was never experienced as something separate from you. It became you. Something else has been appearing lately, and this is harder to explain away. Resentment. Not the loud kind, the kind that arrives in flat, brief flashes and disappears before you can examine it. Someone tells you about their difficulty, and you receive it as you always have. You listen carefully, you hold the details, you offer the steady response they came for. Then, afterward, alone in the car, something cold moves through your chest. It lasts only a second. You do not name it, but it was there, and it had a shape. No one has ever asked me that. Then the guilt arrives, because you believe you have no right to feel this way. They did not know. You never told them. You built the structure that made your invisibility possible. And now you are angry at people for not seeing through a wall you spent your life constructing. You are angry at them for believing you. That is what makes the resentment so difficult to tolerate. It is directed toward people whose only apparent crime was accepting the version of yourself you repeatedly gave them. The mind knows this is unfair and dismisses the case. The body does not receive the ruling. The chest goes cold again the next time, and the next, because whatever is producing the reaction is not interested in whether the reaction is reasonable. It is interested in what has gone unfelt for too long. And then there is what happens when someone finally does offer. Not a casual offer, not let me know if you need anything. A real offer. Someone notices something, stays with the noticing, and moves toward you with genuine attention. Something inside you goes hard. Not sad, not relieved, not touched. Hard. You become less approachable in that moment than at almost any other time. The person offering care becomes, for a few seconds, strangely intolerable. You have never understood why the thing you privately wanted could arrive feeling so much like an intrusion. But it is not an intrusion into your privacy. It is an intrusion into your accounting. Every genuine offer of help places an entry on a ledger you have kept balanced by never allowing anything to be entered on your side. And here is the part you have not fully examined. The tenderness of the offer makes it worse, because the moment someone truly offers, you feel the wanting. It surfaces so quickly and so completely that it frightens you. The hardness that follows is not really a rejection of them. It is the closing of a door on something inside you that you did not know was still so alive. You are not defending yourself from the other person. You are defending yourself from how much of you might emerge if you let them reach you. That is why care feels intrusive. They are not reaching into your privacy. They are reaching toward a hunger you have kept sedated for years. And some part of you fears that if the hunger woke fully, you would not be able to control its size. It would not ask for one thing. It would remember everything. So you keep it asleep, and you call that dignity. Now comes the harder turn, because this arrangement was not only self-protection. You have been circling that truth without allowing yourself to land on it. The person who needs nothing is not vulnerable to anyone. But look at the reverse. The person who needs nothing cannot be disappointed by anyone. And a person who cannot be disappointed cannot be genuinely met. You made yourself difficult to fail. That was the design. But the design produced another consequence. One that does not flatter the persona you built. By refusing to depend on others, you also placed yourself slightly outside the exchange. You were never in debt, never obligated, never fully entangled in the ordinary mess of needing. receiving, disappointing, repairing, and being repaired. You stood beside that mess and called the position strength. There can be a subtle superiority in this. You have felt it, although you may never have spoken it aloud. A faint satisfaction when you manage alone what other people would have needed help to carry. A private register in which you are quietly the person who does not require what everyone else seems to require. You have been keeping score, not consciously, not maliciously, but the score exists. You are winning it, and the prize is a life no one can enter. Your independence was not only fear, it also became a form of quiet withholding. The withholding carried its own pleasure, and that pleasure helped the structure survive. Fear alone cannot sustain an entire life. Something has to reward the repetition. What rewarded this pattern was the small, daily gratification of being the person who did not need. Every no was a tiny victory over a possibility you had already classified as humiliating. Every refusal reconfirmed the story, and the story gave you pride. That is the shadow hidden inside the virtue, not that you were secretly weak, not that your strength was false. The shadow is that, while everyone praised you for requiring nothing, some part of you was also refusing everyone before they had the chance to fail you permanently. Stay with that without turning it into an accusation. None of this was freely chosen. A child who learns that need threatens love does not stand before a full menu of possibilities. The withholding was not cruelty. It was the only form of power available to someone who had been taught that requiring anything made them a burden. If you could not be given to, then no one could ever measure what you cost them. The superiority was compensation for the surrender. You did not begin by taking something away from other people. You took something from yourself first. What remained hardened into a strange kind of pride, and the pride made the deprivation survivable. But it is failing now. That is why the tiredness will not lift. That is why the resentment keeps surfacing. That is why genuine offers of care keep landing in you as threats. The arrangement is still running, but it no longer pays. The praise still comes, but it no longer reaches you. Someone told you recently that you were so strong, and you felt something close to nausea, because for the first time you heard what might be hidden inside the compliment. You heard the relief. You heard how convenient your strength had been for everyone who never had to stop and wonder what carrying everything was doing to you. Perhaps they did not mean it that way. That is almost beside the point. You heard it, and you cannot return to not hearing it. The compliment has been spoiled, and there is nothing yet to replace it. You still cannot ask. The language does not come. The apparatus has never been fully built, but you can no longer continue not asking without knowing exactly what the silence is costing you. So you are standing in the middle, fluent in a role that has stopped sustaining you, unable to perform the alternative, watching the exhaustion deepen while remaining unable to name it aloud to a single person. The old bargain has broken, but it has not yet taught you another way to live. They will notice before you say anything. That is what surprises people about this stage. You have made no announcement. You have declared no new boundary and changed no visible policy. You have simply become slightly less available to the old arrangement. and the field around you registers the difference immediately. A friend says you have been distant lately. Your sister says you seem off. Someone at work uses the word withdrawn, gently, in the tone of a person offering an observation rather than making a complaint. You have not withdrawn, you have stopped over-delivering, but the distinction is almost invisible from the outside because your baseline was never truly a baseline. It was an overpayment, and when an overpayment has continued for years, reducing it looks exactly like taking something away. The people around you are not necessarily being unfair when they feel the change. In one sense, they are being accurate. Something has been removed. What they cannot see is that what has been removed was never owed. Someone will eventually say the sentence, "I miss the old you." Sit with what that means without allowing your first reaction to settle the matter, because they do miss something. What they miss was real, and it was not entirely a role. Some of what they miss is genuinely you. Your attention was sincere. Your steadiness was not fake. The care you gave was not meaningless simply because a wound helped organize it. But that care arrived without visible cost to them. It asked for almost nothing in return. What they are grieving is partly the person and partly the arrangement, and they may not be able to separate the two any more easily than you can. They loved a version of you who rarely required anything. That version was easy to love, not necessarily because they were exploiting you, but because loving someone who makes no claim places very little strain on the person doing the loving. They were allowed to experience closeness without being asked to prove their capacity for reciprocity. The love may have been real. The love was also largely untested. And now, perhaps for the first time, it is being asked to hold something. It is discovering that it does not yet know how. That does not automatically mean the people around you have failed. It means a capacity that was never exercised is being used for the first time. A muscle that trembles under unfamiliar weight is not necessarily betraying you. It may simply be weak because neither of you ever asked it to become strong. This is what makes the grief more complicated than the clean story you may want to tell. You may have been neglected, your needs may have gone unnoticed for years, but you also participated in maintaining the conditions that made them difficult to see. This does not make the neglect your fault. It means the arrangement cannot be understood by assigning all innocence to one side and all responsibility to the other. You wrote some of the terms because they were the only terms you knew. Then you enforced them so consistently that everyone around you forgot there could have been another agreement. Even now, your mouth prepares an apology before the thought arrives. Notice that the reflex is still running while you are examining it. This is what a complex does. It does not dissolve merely because consciousness has finally turned toward it. Seeing the mechanism does not immediately stop the mechanism, but seeing it introduces something that was not there before. A pause. You may never become someone who asks for help lightly. That should be said plainly. The temptation is to imagine a transformed version of yourself who makes requests casually, receives care without tension, and never again feels shame when someone sees the weight you are carrying. Healing may not look like that. What is available may be smaller and less dramatic, not perfect fluency, not the disappearance of fear, only the end of the automatic no. The refusal may still arrive first. Your mouth may still begin forming it before your mind has measured the offer. But one day, there may be half a second of space behind the reflex, and inside that half second, you may occasionally say something else. You will probably not say it well. The words may come too late. They may come wrapped in so many qualifications that the person barely realizes a request has been made. You may explain why it is not urgent, why it is not really a problem, why they should feel completely free to refuse. You may apologize before the request, during the request, and again after they have agreed. Say it badly anyway. Not as a technique, not as proof that you are healed. Say it badly, because badly is the only register in which a language learned late can first be spoken. Waiting until you can ask without discomfort is simply the old mechanism finding another reason to remain employed. And eventually, someone will hesitate. You will hear the pause you have spent your entire life preventing. That is the moment the whole structure was designed to avoid. Yet here is what no one told you when the structure was being built. The pause is not the answer. The pause may be a person adjusting to a request they did not expect from someone who has rarely made one. It may be someone checking their time, their energy, or their ability. It may be the natural sound of another human being moving from one internal position to another. You learned to interpret hesitation as a verdict before you had language for what a verdict was. But hesitation is often only the sound of weight being picked up. The lifting may be awkward, the hands may need to adjust, the person may not carry it in the precise way you hoped. Clumsiness does not always mean unwillingness. And yes, sometimes the answer will be no. Sometimes someone will disappoint you. Someone will misunderstand the size of what you are asking. Someone will offer less than you need, or agree and later resent the agreement. The old mechanism will point to that moment and say, "I told you," but one refusal cannot prove the law you built your life around. It can prove only that this person, in this moment, could not give what you asked. You have spent years turning every imagined no into a universal truth. Now you may have to let an actual no remain specific. You do not know who will come. That is the actual condition. You have never known. The not knowing was what your independence protected, and now that protection is beginning to fail. You are simply a person who does not know whether others will be there, which is what everyone is. That is the ordinary human condition from which you tried to exempt yourself. Everyone else has been living inside uncertain answers all along. They ask, and sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. Sometimes people surprise them with tenderness, and sometimes people reveal their limits. They carry that uncertainty in a way you once mistook for weakness. It was not weakness. It was the price of participation. You were not stronger than them. You were outside. The exhaustion may not disappear quickly. The mechanism is older than most conscious beliefs you hold about yourself, and it will not dismantle according to a clean schedule. There may be long periods when the only visible change is that you can recognize it while it is happening. But there is a difference between a wall you cannot yet cross and a wall you did not know existed. You may not have gained a new ability, but you have lost an alibi. The independence will remain, Much of it belongs to you. Your competence is real, and nothing about healing requires you to become helpless or incapable. What changes is not the capacity to stand alone. What changes is the belief that standing alone is the only position from which you can remain worthy of love. Independence was never the wound. The wound was having no choice but to perform it. The old praise may still come. Someone will still tell you that you are strong, that you never complain, that they do not know how you manage everything alone. But the praise will no longer arrive as proof of your worth. You will hear the bargain inside it. You will recognize the version of yourself it is asking you to continue performing. And even when you smile, some part of you will no longer accept the assignment. That is all that may happen at first. The story that made the deprivation feel dignified will stop convincing you. Then, on some ordinary evening, without ceremony, you may find yourself saying a small, true sentence to someone who did not ask. I am having a difficult time. Could you stay for a while? I could use some help. The sentence will feel larger inside your body than it sounds in the room. Your throat may tighten. Your chest may prepare for the old humiliation. And then you will have to wait for an answer. That waiting is the life you avoided. It is also the life in which someone can finally reach you. You were praised for needing nothing, but needing nothing was never what made you strong. It was what kept you from discovering who might have helped you carry the weight.